Yeah, that's holding them up, and they have to keep everything clear.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to our October 10th APCD Planning and Policy Committee meeting. Madam Clerk, I think we are ready to call our meeting to order. Do you mind calling the roll?
Thank you, Vice Chair Burkett Garcia. I would like to note for the record that we do have a quorum. I'd also like to note for the record that Chair Medina has informed us that he will be absent from today's meeting. All remaining members of the Planning and Policy Committee are participating in person. With that, Member Bush, Member Martinez,
Present.
Member Chu,
Here.
Vice Chair Burkett Garcia.
Here. Thank you. Now we'll go to item B, non-agenda public communication. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Vice Chair Burkett Garcia. We have some members of the public that have submitted requests to speak under non-agenda public communication. I'll call the members by their first names, their first and last names. I would ask that they state their name for the record and that they will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record, and you will have the timer on the screen that you'll be able to use to self-regulate your time. I'll start with Ms. Farida Javier. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Good afternoon. It's moderate 53 at 7:19 a.m. reading, but not true when the ceramics canal next door is fired by artist Donald Fraser of the San Diego Factory Guild. The primary business type is non-metallic mineral product manufacturing known as ceramic, pottery, home business, home occupation operating since 1984, located at 5238 Springview Drive, San Diego, California 92105, a neighborhood dedicated as residential zone. Science through research and studies explains that ceramic pottery industry produces, generates, and emits toxicity such as poison gases, airborne contaminants, and thus that impact harm potentially to human and environment, the man and his shell, Mother Earth. Top polluters, according to country air pollution control district air mobility such as on land, air, and water constitutes 76%. Industrial activity 14%, home consumers 9%, and agriculture 1%. Where does ceramics pottery and our poor neighborhood part of Kumeyaay, ancestral territorial land, and presently in the District 9 political territory that contribute to the totality of air pollution, air quality falls. History is done. We cannot rewrite it no more, but we learn lessons only for the man and the thing to survive. This is what our society is for, the value. Respect, defend, and protect, and the spearhead and frontliner of the society is sure our government. From the depths that root. How did the pollution, ceramics, pottery about?
Thank you.
You failed in the Hollywood audition.
Oh, no.
Our next speaker is Cesar Javier. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record. And you can self-regulate your time.
We stand here, Cesar Javier, again and again, even if our case will be resolved politically, legally, morally, because this is our air pollution institution. We own this, all of us, and we should make it effective, efficient in all angles of providing air quality for all. Not only for the rich, not only for the absentee, who is the absent here, Mario. This is for all, especially vulnerable human beings like me now. I am 73, and my friend here is still 49 years old, if I may say it. Please, let us be honest and wise. After all, we are free to exert our efforts to use our honest and wise gift from supra being. My point here is we need to have this blue permit. This is the result of investigation prior to approval of a humble business tax permit. The city failed. The mayor representing the city of San Diego, with a member of the governing body, failed because the culprit is not the Kiln Ceramics, it is the applicant. He made a home run. I think he is one of the Padre baseball player. Home run, one hit, very easy, time, and pay the $38 annually. It's unjust. It is iniquity. It is greed. And now they renewed it with the same amount, the same home run. The city failed to screen these applicants. You can never say it is not emitting poison gases. No, ma'am, no, sir. The fine ceramic scale, it is used to heat, fire, cook, bake, whatever. The transformation of that clay mixed with chemicals, with metals like silica and lead will emit poison gases, sir. Especially chemical engineers. I was a substitute teacher in chemistry. I didn't know what to teach, but I read the book to them and they understood. Transformation from that stage to gases. What happened? I showed you. And even the artist then, with the dust, we get sick, we die. Doctor, please confirm, and it is true. Help us. Let's help Air Pollution Control District. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That concludes public testimony in the room. I would like to invite any members of the public that are joining us virtually that would like to provide public testimony on non-agenda public comments. So please raise your hand at this time using the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Seeing no hands raised, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item C, approval of the August 29th statement of proceedings. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that would like to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Vice Chair Bertha Garcia. We've received no request here in the room. However, if there are any members joining us virtually that wish to address the board under public communication for the approval of the statement of proceedings, you may use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to indicate that you wish to speak. Seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public wishing to address the board on this item.
Thank you. Would any of the members of the Planning and Policy Committee have any comments?
No comment, I move approval.
Okay. All in favor?
Is there a second?
Oh, second. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on a second.
That's okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And no, we all voted, so.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bertha Garcia, with members Bush and Medina absent, that motion passes with those board members who are present voting aye.
Great, thank you. Now we'll move to D1 for our agenda items. We're going to be receiving an update on efforts to address ongoing sewage odors in the Tijuana River Valley. This is informational only, so no vote will be taken by the committee on this. Madam Clerk, do you mind providing public testimony instructions?
Thank you, Vice Chair Burkett Garcia. I would ask any members of the public that are joining us via teleconference to please use the instructions provided on the screen to indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. If there are any members of the public that are here in the room that would like to submit a slip, please do so at this time. Once the presentation begins, we will not accept any more requests to speak. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Paula?
Sure, I will, I'll kick us off.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Burkett Garcia and committee members and members of the public. This item is an update to the efforts of the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District to respond to the ongoing crisis of sewage and transboundary odors in the Tijuana River Valley. Our staff has been working to quickly implement the direction of our governing board that was made at its last meeting last month. We wanted to provide you and the public with an update on our work to date. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to revisit the direction from our governing board that was provided at the September 12th, 2024 meeting. This slide summarizes that direction. We'll be talking about all of these items in more detail, but at a very general level, SDAPCD staff has been working to develop a program for providing up to 10,000 air purifiers in the affected communities. We've been upgrading our monitoring that we're conducting in the area, and we're developing a public information approach to ensure that community members have access to our data and more information about what it means for them. And we've coordinated with the Office of Emergency Services to determine how health alerts can be provided through their system. And we are finalizing a letter to the President and Governor to reevaluate declaration of a state of emergency over this situation. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Watt to discuss some of the details of our work to develop an air purifier program.
Thanks, Paul. You can go to the next. I'd probably do the next one like that. So we started out working with CARB and others to identify a pot of funding that we can use $2.7 million in interest earnings from our 8617 incentive program that we can use towards making the purchase of these filters. We brought this idea to both the community steering committees in Portside and International Border community, and they both expressed support for using these funds for this program, which is great. Although this money could have been used for other typical emission reduction projects that we usually do, zero trucks, charging infrastructure, things like that. I think we understand, and the community understands the urgency associated with this situation, and working to create this program as quickly as possible. So really good start in terms of the amount of funding that we've identified to get this program up and running. We've also had conversations with CARB about air purifier specifications. One thing that's important to note is that any air purifier that you use that has activated carbon in it, similar to the blue air units that we use as part of our PAIR program initially, and the similar units that the county used for their pilot program, are going to provide some relief in reducing odors. But given our board's direction at our last meeting to look at filters that contain potassium permanganate, that's a mouthful, or something equivalent that specifically addresses these hydrogen sulfide odors. That's something that we've worked with CARB to put together some specifications that you can see on the screen that will inform our request for bids for the filters that we're going to work towards purchasing as part of this program. We're coordinating with the counties, the Department of Purchasing and Contracting, to get this up on their BINET program as soon as possible to start getting those bids and looking at what the costs are going to be for those particular filters. As we work to select and purchase these filters, we're also coordinating with our partners at the county to determine how we can help distribute them efficiently and effectively throughout the community. We're working with county staff to learn from and support their initial pilot program that they did. And we'll be making available that $160,000 that we talked about at our last board meeting to extend their program. So our two agencies are currently in the process of finalizing an agreement to transfer that funding. Both of our boards have approved that work. The county board approved it earlier this week. And really want to thank North County for their work and dedication to moving that forward as well. Additionally, we're having discussions with a host of partners in the area, school districts, City of San Diego, City of Imperial Beach, local health clinics, community-based organizations to really try to, establish this network to help us with the distribution of these filters. As Paul mentioned, we're talking about a pretty large number of filters, up to 10,000, and so it's going to take a lot of work to get these things out in the community. And so far, we've had really good response from all the agencies that we've had conversations with. The shared goal here is to try to find a way to get these things out as quickly as possible and prioritize as much as we can to those most in need, families with children, with health conditions, seniors, those who most need relief. So that's the ultimate goal here in working with all these different partners to make sure we can get things out there as quickly as efficiently as possible. Another important component here is going to be education and outreach materials to make sure that the community really understands the information they need, first and foremost, how to access the purifier program and receive a purifier when we have that ready to go, making sure that they know how to use it and it works properly, and how to most effectively, help provide some relief from the odors they're experiencing based on the filter that we provided. So that's kind of where we stand on the filter side of the house. Excited about the progress that we've made going forward and look forward to continuing discussions with our community partners in the county on rolling things out. So with that, I'll pass it over to Domingo to give us an update on the monitoring.
Thank you, Mike. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next. Thank you. In order to provide more precise air quality data in the Tijuana River Valley that can inform needed public health action, SDAPCD is actively working on deploying a network of reference-grade equipment to monitor levels of hydrogen sulfide. To help inform these efforts, we have considered input from the South Coast Air Quality Management District and from a team of researchers from the University of California, San Diego State University, currently conducting water quality and public health research in the Tijuana River. Furthermore, we have sought assistance from the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, to provide resources to set up a hydrogen sulfide monitoring program. The EPA recently awarded an Inflation Reduction Act grant to support other monitoring needs at SDAPCD and has now provided flexibility to use this grant to support our hydrogen sulfide monitoring network. The California Air Resources Board also provided flexibility in the use of previously awarded funding to shift those funds towards the Tijuana River Valley emergency and has lent us a hydrogen sulfide reference grade monitor. In addition, the South Coast Air Quality Management District also provided immediate support by conducting one-time mobile air quality sampling, as well as lending SDAPCD a reference grade monitor. The two monitors we have on loan from CARB and South Coast have allowed SDAPCD to quickly supplement our monitoring efforts while our order for our own equipment is fulfilled by the manufacturer. We currently have two monitoring locations in operation, one in San Isidro at Fire Station 29, and the second one that became operational earlier this week in the community of Nestor at Berry Elementary School. We are working diligently to bring a third site online in Imperial Beach at the Imperial Beach City Hall/Fire Station. Our goal is to have this monitor up and running by the end of the month. Next slide, please. We continue to provide updates to the community on our efforts to address odors from the Tijuana River through our dedicated Tijuana River Valley website, social media, and through other forums such as the International Border Community Steering Committee. We are currently developing a public-facing dashboard that provides historical and real-time hydrogen sulfide monitoring data. This slide shows a mock-up of what the dashboard will look like. We will publish this dashboard in the coming weeks, as we also complete the development of an accompanying alert process in collaboration with partner agencies. And I'll share more information on this later in the presentation. As this information is published on our website, we will promote it widely with the public partner agencies and organizations and the media, so members of the public become familiar with this resource. Next slide, please. We would like to take this opportunity to also share our most recent hydrogen sulfide monitoring readings. The levels of hydrogen sulfide have remained relatively low in the past 3 weeks, as measured at our monitoring station in San Isidro, which is depicted in blue on the graph, and more recently at our monitoring site at Berry Elementary and the community of Nestor, depicted in green on the graph. The Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or OEHA, establishes health guidance values, which are concentrations of contaminants in the air at which the public exposed to those concentrations might experience adverse health effects. This graph shows hourly hydrogen sulfide concentrations for the past week, all at levels below the 30 parts per billion threshold established by OEHA. At this level, some members of the public may experience health effects such as headache and nausea. Next slide. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Mike.
Thank you, Domingo. We're really happy to report that the number of air quality complaints submitted to us reporting strong odors have significantly decreased, as you can see on this graph. Between the end of July and beginning of September, we received approximately 2,000 odor complaints from communities around the Tijuana River. During that time, there were several conditions that intensify the odors. Those conditions were some of the equipment operated by IBWC was not fully operational. In addition, the average volume of untreated flow being directed to the CJ River was about 45 million gallons per day. And we also experienced really high temperature. So all these conditions combined result in a situation that created a very high number of odor complaints. But as you can see, the number of complaints significantly decreased. And we have verified that the repairs that were needed for the equipment operated by IBWC has been addressed. The flow being directed to the river significantly decreased, and our temperatures now are. So that was my update on air quality complaints. Now I'm gonna turn it over to Paula. Oh, you.
Back to me.
Domingo. Back to me.
Thank you, Mike. Slide. There we go. Thank you. SDAPCD has continued to coordinate with local, state, and federal entities to support our air monitoring efforts, develop guidance with public health measures to inform a public alert system, and support information sharing and public outreach. In the past month, we have worked closely with the County Public Health Department, the Department of Environmental Health and Quality, the California Department of Public Health, and the CDC's Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry on the development of guidance on the thresholds of hydrogen sulfide that would trigger different public health recommendations for the community. This guidance will be available on our website, and together with our monitoring data, will provide a clear picture for members of the community on what to do if they experience hydrogen sulfide odors and if the hydrogen sulfide levels reach certain elevations. With this information, SDAPCD is also working on developing an alert process in case a more proactive public health approach is needed if dangerous levels of hydrogen sulfide that pose an immediate threat to life or health are reached. Next slide. And now I will turn it over to Paula.
Sure. Next slide, please. Thank you, Domingo. So I just wanted to provide a quick update on the letter that is being prepared to request reevaluation of the state of emergency declaration. This draft is currently with council for review. We have taken some time to really be strategic about what the contents of the letter are, in order to try to address some of the responses that have been made to previous requests for emergency declarations. So the letter will outline all of the work that we are currently doing to address the crisis. We'll also note that the local response is not sufficient to solve the underlying cause of the odors. We'll be also documenting the community complaints of odor and the associated health impacts that we've been hearing about that have been associated with the infrastructure failures and with the highest ever flows that have been going through the river. And then we'll be emphasizing impacts to infrastructure as we mentioned at our last at the governing board meeting. Some of the responses we've seen in the past have been that the odors are not related to natural disaster type of events. However, we will be reminding both the president and the governor that natural events had contributed to those infrastructure failures, and that the extreme heat events are also linked to the higher level of odors, complaints, and associated health impacts that we're hearing about from the public. So we anticipate that letter will be able to go out early next week. We're just putting the final touches on it in the next couple of days. And next slide. So that concludes our overview. This is just kind of a high level. We'll be coming back to the full board at the November 14th meeting to, provide much more detail in terms of the finalized plans on all of these items. But we're working as quickly as we can to make progress in advance of that meeting, because we understand that, the board's direction was to come back with a plan in 60 days. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we are moving as quickly as we can to implement, as much of this direction as we can in the short term. And with that, we are happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Vice Chair Burkbeck Garcia. We have received no virtual request to speak on this item. However, we have one request here in the conference room. I'll call forward Mr. Cesar Javier. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record, and please self-regulate your time using the timer that will be here on the screen.
Cesar Javier, this is not a monopoly. I am just a humble contributor. As a Boy Scout, I can only say, how many minutes would I be? 3. As a Boy Scout, trained as a humble leader, I say to you, pass the ball, hit the home run. Number 2, we have to use our 10 fingers. I'm gifted, I have 10 fingers. My friend here, Sue, how many fingers do we have there? We confer. We have all these talents: mathematics, logical reasoning, arts, languages, music. Mine is now music. Singing the song repetitively. Spatial, kinesthesia, natural, intrapersonal, and the hardest, please examine ourselves, intrapersonal. Am I doing the right thing? Am I capable to do this? Am I capable to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am? Honestly, be wise. Let's use our 10 fingers. The effort to address this crisis is truly emergency, the world now. And the only thing that we could rationally address this is not only to protect air quality. Please erase that. Protect humans, not just the air quality. Because the air quality here means we are protecting air pollution. Let's go direct to the point. Let's protect the people from air pollution. And let's have the air pollution control district distribute all the mission of providing clean air to everybody. Simple as that, because that is one of the public delivery of public good. It says there, simple, make it simple, timely, and effective. Never mind efficiency, we can do that later, but we have to act. My question now, to bring about that confidence in our agency. What's your name, huh? How many are you in the family? You know, you are only 0.3 miles from the emission. Come on. What's your name, sir? To the heart. Please go there. Let's go there and bring a cracker. Sorry, this I could bring to you, and portal or analgesic. We do that. That is moral, part of our mission. We cannot provide at this time all respiratory. We need also, but good to KP and the sharp inhalators.
Thank you, Mr. Javier.
That's what we mean, the moral action that we need. Clean air for everybody, not air quality, because air quality is deceiving.
Thank you, Mr. Javier. Your time has concluded.
As what we are inhaling, hydrogen sulfide, that is not air quality. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony on this item.
Would any of my fellow planning committee members have any comments?
And some list of questions.
Number 2.
First, with the county's pilot program, what information do we have on numbers and how those were distributed, what priority system they use, what criteria they use, do we have that kind of information to work with?
We're working with them to gather a lot of information. Their initial rollout of that pilot program was 400-ish filters, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. I think they had a total response of over 3,500 folks requesting filters, so obviously there's a big demand there. We're in the process of working with them on that agreement for this next tranche of the 160,000 that's going to go out, and then coordinating our larger effort to make sure that we're all on the same page.
So did they have a priority system?
Initially, they did not. I think it was all done. Well, I believe, and I think Kathy's on the line, she may be able to help me out with this. I believe they did their initial outreach, they prioritized that outreach, but in terms of as requests came in, it was a randomized drawing. Kathy, can you correct me if I'm wrong on that?
Yeah, that's correct, is that I think they did some focused outreach, but the selection of people who had registered was by random lottery drawing.
So are we getting a listing of the 400 that were distributed by address and name or something like that? We know who has already received the filter.
That'll be part of our coordination with them. We don't have that currently. As well as hopefully the additional 3,500 or so that are.
The funding from EPA, does that have any criteria in terms of what kind of filters we get, how many we get, who should receive them?
Not in terms of prioritization or anything like that.
So EPA didn't specify whether it goes to the most needy, goes with the health conditions that may warrant that they need.
They did not specify. Our work plan submitted to EPA was based on what the county had done, so it's pretty high level. They give us some flexibility to use those funds.
Great. So, Mike, I guess you're in the effort of looking at what criteria we may want to have.
We're working on that, yeah.
Right. So my question then is that going to be then part of the agreement with the county that they use such criteria that we may want?
Similar criteria that we may want. That's something we can talk with them about. I don't think that's been part of the discussion to date, but as I said, we're working on finalizing that agreement with them.
So, I mean, the action of the board that we took, we didn't discuss that.
Correct.
In terms of criteria. So I think then it becomes the issue of, is that something that staff develop that criteria and provides that kind of criteria to the county in the MOU as a matter of efficiency, effectiveness, and making sure that we're using these funds to the best we can, the community. What I'm trying to avoid is the other side of that is that we find that these filters go to places where there's not really an air quality problem or a family that is much less need than another. That would not bode well for us as an agency or the county and ultimately EPA.
Right.
So I think it behooves us to ensure that that kind of criteria is developed and maybe used, well, it would be used as part of our MOU with the county in this 160,000 from EPA. And it would show that when EPA provides us some funding, we try to make the best use of it.
I think we also want to make sure that there's consistency amongst the programs so they don't look different, right? From a public, just from the public's perspective, I'm not sure that they're super interested whether they get a filter from the county or the ABCD. No. They just want the process to be similar. So that's another important consideration for us.
But I would hate to have a family that is in dire need that's right next to the concentrated sites that we know we have bad readings, not receive one, and a family that is a few miles away even, that just don't have much as much of a need for them to receive one. If we have much of that taking place, then that would not go well.
Right. That's certainly our mindset. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not, but we're going to do the best we can to make sure that we can prioritize with the information that we have.
Well, it's not going to be perfect. It's okay. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for. I know a first come first serve basis. We know who that serves.
Correct.
Those who got in line first, or if it's a lottery system, we know how that works. We know people that sometimes when they enter a lottery, they'll enter it several times to increase their chance. So those systems may not give us the kind of impact with these funds as we're looking for. The other, Domingo, I know this is hard for us to understand this solution more as we get more information. What's our best method of mapping out concentrations of the pollutants? And I'm using the term pollutant. I know we're only measuring hydrogen sulfide, but I think we could presume that probably may be other pollutants there that at some point we may have to look into and measure. But that's a different question. The main question is, how are we mapping the concentrations by time, by geography, and concentration? So we know by our own map monitoring there are peaks that's episodic. But knowledge of other toxins and how they affect the community, we know that depending on the number of environmental factors and weather factors, it moves differently. It's not simply a circle by distance, although sometimes or often we just do that we do that with 1,000 feet is less than, or quite a bit less than. But we know that's not always true, that some canyons, due to geographic conditions or weather conditions, may have much greater concentrations than something that's equally distant, but in a different direction. How are we at that in terms of being able to get to that kind of detail?
Sure. So there's it's kind of a multi-part question, so I'll try to address it in different ways. So as far as the geography, right, we want to have a network of monitors, at different sites, looking, recommendations from the researchers that were there conducting studies based on their observation, and also recommendations from our partner agencies like EPA and CARB. And looking at all of these different pieces, selecting within those recommendations the sites where it would be feasible for us to deploy the equipment. We need, access to electricity. We need to develop a land agreement with, whoever the landowner is to host our equipment, etc. So all of that criteria goes into play for selecting the specific sites in terms of geography. So we have one in the community of San Isidro, which we've been working with for quite some time now. The most recent one in Berry Elementary, that's more where the hotspot has been identified more recently during the summer events. And then another one in Imperial Beach. So we're covering the three main communities. And as we continue to collect data, we can then determine if there's need for more in other areas, depending on how the concentrations behave in the next coming month. The other piece that you mentioned regarding more like the meteorology aspect of it, we do still have our network of sensors that we had deployed over the past year that are collecting meteorological data such as wind speed and direction, that are also providing us that information that we can also consider in terms of trying to understand how any odor impacts might travel in the region and how that may impact one area over another. Just to share one interesting observation that we had with our recent deployment of the site in Berry Elementary, that we were seeing higher concentration last few days. But that also has to do with, again, with wind direction and other conditions, right? So we're trying to gather as much data as we can to study those patterns and find something, get to that information and be able to determine if we need additional sites that we can develop in the future.
And if I could just kind of build on what Domingo was talking about, we've also, we consulted with South Coast, for example, and we also have ready to go SUMA canisters. So if we know that there's going to be, say, an elevated flow over certain days, we would have the ability to go out and take some grab samples as South Coast came down and did to supplement, right? So we can look for a whole host of other things at that time to give us a better idea as to what additional resources we might need in that area. And then finally, the other piece that, you know, we're trying to bring in as many resources as we can. We've also had conversations with EPA Region 9 to talk about, you know, potential for, you know, additional consultation as this develops, and as we get more data, there may be additional resources that we can ask for, in terms of, you know, looking at a comprehensive way to really study this area, because we're doing what we can on this very short-term basis to get as many resources deployed as we can. But over time, we may find that more is needed. And so we're working with, you know, local, state, and federal partners to try and make that happen.
And just to add to that, we also have inspectors on site. I know that doesn't sound very sophisticated, but that's important because they are documenting what the public is experiencing. And so that's also very important. And then, you know, our plans, they needed to adjust because depending on the circumstances, you know, if we have equipment malfunction or, you know, if the flows increase again, we have to revisit these parameters to make sure that we get an accurate assessment of what's going on. And we could also use modeling tools to kind of see what the dispersion looks like and take into consideration all the weather conditions to have a better idea as to how these communities are being impacted.
To do modeling like that, really need a lot of information and experience, I was thinking, and I don't know if we're at that level yet. I think it takes some time to do good modeling like that. I mentioned that at Board of Supervisors meeting just earlier this week. We're fortunate to have several higher, you know, universities, well-known universities that are known throughout the world with researchers. And it so happens that they were doing some research in here, which gives us data on this that probably no one else in the world was doing at the time with regards to these pollutants. So these are, you know, researchers. I know they're not in the field of, you know, pollution control districts. I know they're not in the public health field. Nevertheless, they're probably writing the documents that you guys studied in school when you become a person that's involved with it. So, how can we use that data to help us with the modeling to know the extent of the pollution, the kind of pollution that we have, and maybe also having some better idea of how the meteorological conditions are affecting pollution and giving us these peaks, for example, at different times of the day or evening, as well as what are real toxic levels, you know, what we consider a toxic level. I know we have to use data that's been established somewhere, but I've heard that there's 30 different levels of different standards used with regards to how much pollution is bad enough for you to, for someone to say that that is not helpful. So it's hard to figure out even to determine the level of organization used. But my question then is, how can we integrate all the available information, regardless of who's producing it, and just look at it and see how we can help that with our efforts?
Okay. We have been in communication with the group, and we have requested their data so that we can, you know, look at it. They've shared some presentations with us with information. We have considered their recommendations based on the equipment that they recommended we use for the development of our monitoring network, and we continue to be in communication with them. They shared with us that they were going to publish their data sometime this week, and we are hoping to meet with them once we have confirmation that they publish so that they can share with us, you know, some of their findings, and we can take their input into the process.
And so what we've been doing is coordinating, I think as Domingo mentioned, with EPA, with ATSDR, with CDPH to try to determine what are those action levels. But I think what would be really helpful is for us to be able to take a really close look at their data, you know, once they publish, we can sit down with them to say, you know, what were the levels they were seeing, because we know that we had this extreme event in September where we had extreme heat, extreme flows, the equipment failures all at the same time. It would be important to take a look at that and be mindful of those levels they were seeing. So that we can have be better prepared for the next event, because as we've said in a lot of different places, we're one pipe break away, one extreme heat event away from being back in that situation. And so, like I say, we're working with the county and public health partners, state and federal, to determine what are those action levels. But at the same time, we want to, use whatever information we can to try and predict, what we might be looking at in another incident like that in terms of level.
I'm glad that you are working on this. Particularly, I know you've been working overtime a lot on all these issues, so I really want to thank all of you for doing that and trying to piece all the pieces together, all the moving pieces at the same time. I was entertaining possibly making a motion to the effect of dealing with criteria going forward, but let me hold back on that and see if any other committee members want to comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the updates, and I had a question. Can we go to the slide that shows the different levels? As it is the reading slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I remember at the last hearing mentioning of the time the readings were being done, and mentioning that in the middle of the night there's higher readings and there isn't anyone measuring except the independent researchers, right? Does this capture, like, is this a cumulative reading for the day? And then have we begun to do readings in the middle of the night?
We have been doing continuous monitoring on an hourly basis. So this is what is included in this chart. All the points on the lines that you see there are hourly averages for the days that you see displayed there. This is just reflecting this past week, but we have historical data for past weeks as well. The line in blue represents the data from our monitor in San Isidro, and the line in green in the past few days is what we recently deployed in Berry Elementary. But this is monitoring on a continuous basis, 24/7.
Okay, good. Okay, because I remember that was a concern, and then I'm glad to see that there's you are talking to the researchers, and there's their findings will be released, and you will be working with them. So it looks like there's been follow through on the request that came up at the last hearing.
Let's clarify one thing.
Yeah.
So this chart is updated weekly and posted to our website. In addition to that, there's also a button on our website where folks can see those hourly readings on a real-time basis, and it's not a super exciting looking chart, but it's a string chart that shows those levels on an hourly basis. And so you click on it and you can see up to the latest hour what those readings.
And is that on the main homepage, or is that?
There's a link on the main homepage, and that will take you to the river page, summarizes all of our efforts and includes this data.
Awesome. Okay, and then let me think what else I'm trying to think, because I was writing notes and I remember what else I wanted. Oh, regarding the letter to the governor and the president. I'm glad we're doing that, because that's been something I've been hearing, for months, like, why won't the governor do this? And I think a lot of it was, there's a way to, but it's like, what constitutes a state of emergency based on guidelines at that level, right? And then I've also heard there could be political things happening in the background, which we might not know that or get to know that, right? So I appreciate the approach that we're taking to identify what were those previous requests others have made. Like, I know the mayor of Vero Beach has made the request, and other agencies possibly have, and kind of what they included and where that's not meeting the guidelines that to achieve that status, so that we're not trying to repeat the same language and approach, but we're trying to find a different approach. So I do appreciate that. I think that's smart. And that's you said that'll probably go out this in the next week or so. Okay. And then will we get to see that ahead of time, or we just like let us know this is what we sent out?
I had when we met in September, the board said to just get it
Okay,
out.
gotcha. Okay.
But I can
Maybe
send it
after-
out as soon as it's, yeah. send it
When
to
you
the
send it,
board.
maybe tell us this is what we sent out.
Yeah, instead of waiting till the.
Right. I don't want to hold up that at all.
It's a public letter, though. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Public regard.
but yeah, and I don't want it to be held for us to like, review. I don't want to. And then I'm trying to think of the other thing that I wanted to ask you. Oh, the new hydrogen sulfide platform that will be public facing. When did you say that again, that was gonna go live?
So we're waiting to finalize the guidance document that will inform the different thresholds and the public health actions. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
And then when that document is finalized, because it's an accompanying document to that dashboard. So
Okay,
when that's
got
finalized, we will push both products out to our website and, we'll do social media. and-
Okay, good. How are you gonna announce it? How are you gonna? publish
Yeah,
it?
no, we're definitely thinking about a comprehensive, outreach effort to make sure that, we're letting folks know that those resources are available, and then
Yeah.
also on a continuous basis, make sure that we promote them, so that everybody's really familiar with them.
And just one thing, just having experience, which I'll talk more when we do the comments thing, but having experienced the recent kind of crisis in my city, I think it's always great to be proactive with communication and let the media know who they should go to for questions, And, when they have questions, is to go to, the experts and people who can speak to those things. So maybe when we do that, we can announce it to our media partners so that they know that it exists. And then, that's also an opportunity for us to like inform the public and get the message out.
Yeah, absolutely, that's part of the plan is to do some sort of media, release, yeah.
That's all my comments because, Director Chair Shu was very comprehensive and covered most of it, so thank you. I only needed to ask a few things. Thank you.
I have a few questions also. First of all, I want to thank the staff for all the work and due diligence you've done. I know you guys are working not just during work hours, but after hours and on weekends, because I've been CC'd on some of those emails with the San Diego State and UCSD people and Domingo. So I do really appreciate all the effort that you guys have been putting in behind the scenes. This was a great presentation. It was very comprehensive. I also want to thank you guys for answering some of the questions I had at the last governing board meeting, like I know that you guys put that in there, like that was one of my questions. So you guys put in there 300 square feet. One of the questions I didn't ask, but I thought about, and you guys read my mind, is like, how heavy are these filters? You're trying to keep it under 25 pounds to make sense, because if they need to move it from room to room, we need to make sure it's movable. My question about how long they were gonna last, you included that today, the 2 years, and that there are gonna be additional filters. And then also my concern that we were getting the right kind of devices. And so I'm basically saying thank you for answering the questions that I had at the governing board meeting. And then a question I didn't have, which was, how are you gonna get help distributing things, which schools, community centers and everything. So that is great. Now I want to go back to slide 8 again. The one that has and that is 30 parts per billion. I want to make sure not parts per million.
Correct.
Okay, so when OEHA, and you may or may not have an answer to this, I kind of tried to look this up and I got overwhelmed, I'm not gonna lie. This is beyond my medical degree education, and I'm married to an engineer, but not this kind of engineer, so he wasn't helpful at all either. This 30 parts per billion, which is their health guidance value, is that a static number, like an exposure at 30 parts per billion over 30 minutes, over a day, over a minute? Like, is this a cumulative thing? Because we may not be meeting the 30 parts per billion, but over the course of months and years, can we still use that 30 parts per billion number?
Right, so this is for an hourly average
Okay,
level. We we're trying to learn more information about the different thresholds that would be applicable in this situation, because some of the thresholds are also developed based on working conditions. So if you're indoors, if you're not in a particular setting, so part of the conversation that we're having with our partners at public health, at DSER, CPPH, et cetera, is trying to understand what kind of thresholds are applicable to this particular situation. We are working more specifically on the more immediate thresholds or levels that we would see, just so that we can respond quickly. But as we get more and more data to our monitoring efforts, we'll have a more robust data set that then we can have those conversations as far as, okay, we're seeing these sustained levels at this particular level, if it's lower than 30 for this, amount of time, what does that mean then for the population?
And you'll find when you start digging into some of the research behind these levels that there's a lot of discussion about, these are based on, to a certain extent, odor sensitivity of individuals. And so that different individuals are going to be impacted at different levels, right? And so we know that the human nose can pick up hydrogen sulfide at levels much lower than this. People are going to be having, potential physiological effects associated with that. So as Miko mentioned, this is kind of the 1 hour average that OECA has developed based on physiological effects. There are also others that we're looking at that look at that longer term time horizon. And, as you mentioned, over time, we can be looking at more of those levels.
But this is really for healthy adults. I mean, they didn't test children on this, did they? So we could presume probably this 30 parts per billion is probably for work condition or something.
No,
It's the ambient.
Ambient
Yeah, this is
condition.
not
I know,
a-
but in terms of the 30 parts per billion, is that for
Into consideration
sensitive
sensitive population. They call this the reference exposure level, and there's
So
certain.
it's very safe aspect. How about the health condition?
Well, that's the
That's
thing,
variable, right?
it's gonna impact people in different ways.
Right, everyone's different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just generally, if I may, the levels that we're talking about are ones that would produce short-term effects while you're exposed to the odor.
Sure.
At higher levels, that's where you would start to see those longer-term health effects, and those, show what we're measuring in reference to this. But that's not to say that folks exposed to that level or higher are likely to experience health effects from that. They might experience short-term physiological effects, which are somewhat,
Right.
which subside once
Sure.
they're not exposed to that odor.
So these are our two stations, so very elementary and
Correct.
cathedral.
Yeah, that's.
They're not really next to the river that there is that distance. How far is it from here to?
I don't have the exact distance, but the site of Berry Elementary is pretty close, is relatively close to the river.
That's the school I was the most worried about.
Right, so that's the closest school we've got to.
Correct.
Right.
But I think the other issue is, these are 1 hour averages versus, we could have a spike that could be much higher. And I think you may have a spike that exceeds that level, but it only may last for 5-10 minutes.
Right.
And for a council member, or board member, Marcus Bush, he was exposed to for less than 20 minutes at one of the centers, and he got noticeably ill, and that almost lasted for over a day. So maybe he's more sensitive to others. I don't know. Do okay, and other researchers, of course, have experienced that. So yeah, different people are going to be exposed to different ways. But I don't want to. I mean, this is very good data for what we can do, but I think we should realize that this is still very limited data in terms of time. We don't have minute by minute. We can go out and take samples, but even those samples are only for a short period of time. and the concentration levels of whatever samples and tubes. That may be the best we could do, but if we had another dozen of these meters that could put in remote locations and not have to worry about electricity and security, that would be great. But we may not be able to do that. And I'm concerned as we get back to the issue of distribution of filters, we may have to resort to something simpler, which maybe if you're close to the river, you know, whether it's half mile, whatever, you have priority. So to me, that's what we're facing now and how we're going to administer the EPA funding and soon some additional funding that we do our due diligence to make sure we do that effectively and make the best use of that funding. And I was going to put that in form of a motion, but I think that'll be not wise and gracious reasons. So I'll just leave you up to you. We've had this discussion, this public meeting. You know that that's something that in my view, if we make it, if we do our due diligence in that effort, we work that into the MOU with the county. We look for that, and as we are able to implement criteria that make sense, and we have enough data to do so. And I could totally understand if we don't have the data, we don't have the modeling, we may not have that. But to me, we have information on, we know it affects younger people more than adults. That's established. We know that if you have adverse health conditions, that your need is greater. And we know where the concentrations generally are now. We know it's not 5 miles away. we know it's within proximity to the river.
Just if I may just follow up on your earlier question, staff did confirm that the very elementary site is within half a mile of the river, and our cathedral site is within 0.8 miles of the river. And our instruments do collect minute by minute data. It's reported on hourly averages, but we do collect minute by minute data.
Yeah. So if you have minute by minute data, what's your highest 1 minute account?
I don't have that information right now, unfortunately, but I can follow up with you.
Yeah, to me, it would be nice to know how they spike, so that when our average may never go over the 30, or maybe for 30 minutes it did, and the rest of the time it was close to zero. You know, it would be very interesting to see if there's that kind of variation in 1 hour, because there's some evidence that something like that may be going on in that valley due to certain atmospheric conditions that we don't understand. So I think it behooves us to look at that. I better stop asking questions for you.
Question, sorry about that. Can we keep sliding up, please? Sorry. On the slide, I'm looking between 10.3 and 10.4. We have a big gap there. Was there a problem with the monitor, or is there a reason that we're not having data show up on some of these things?
Sure, that's a good question. Where you see gaps are typically either the equipment is being maintained or it's being recalibrated, or maybe there was an issue with it. But in the past few days, it was recalibrated, and so that's probably what that gap is. I have to look more deeply into it, but those are typically the reasons where you wouldn't see.
And how often are we having to recalibrate? Like, how often is it offline that we're not?
It's
getting
not,
it?
yeah, it shouldn't be often. I can follow up with staff to figure out.
Okay, that seems like a big gap in that 10.3, 10.4.
So yeah, when we do calibrations, it does need to be worked on for several hours.
That's it. That was my last question. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go on to agenda item D2, proposal for adoption of the SDAPCD guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act. Madam Clerk, do you mind providing public testimony instructions?
Thank you, Vice Chair Burke Garcia. I would ask the members of the public that are joining us via teleconference to please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or press *9 now to indicate that you wish to address the board on this item. Those individuals that are joining us in the room that wish to address the board on this item, I'd ask that you submit your speaker slip at this time. Once the presentation begins, we will no longer accept requests to speak. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Director O'Haney.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm gonna turn it over to Mohsen Azemi, who is the Chief of our Engineer Division.
Thank you, Manny. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Burke, Garcia, and other board members. As Manny mentioned, my name is Mohsen Azemi, and I'm Chief of Engineering. And I'll be providing a short presentation on the San Diego Air Pollution Control District proposed CEQA guidelines. You can go to the next slide. Just as a quick background on what CEQA is, the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, is a state law that mandates the public agencies evaluate potential environmental impact of proposed projects before making decisions. As the local agency responsible for enforcing air pollution control laws, San Diego Air Pollution Control District prepares and reviews CEQA documents to determine projects' potential impacts on the environment, if we're preparing one, or to look at projects' air quality impacts if they are commenting on a CEQA document. Currently, we operate under general CEQA principles and general guidelines that are applicable to state and local agencies. And this item is proposing to formally adopt a CEQA guideline for the district to provide clear direction to staff, project applicants, lead or responsible agencies, and public regarding air quality requirements and review standards. Go to the next slide, please. The district CEQA guidelines are intended to supplement the state CEQA guidelines for practical application to specific projects that are approved or undertaken by the district. So what's the purpose? The purpose of these guidelines is to guide the district staff in carrying out the requirements of CEQA and to assure the public that environmental impacts related to the district's actions are thoroughly and consistently evaluated and addressed. The guidelines contain various sections that provide additional background information on CEQA requirements, roles and responsibilities of district in implementing these requirements, the general procedures to assist staff with project evaluation, and a description of how the district will incorporate environmental justice, health, and equity into its project review process. Can you go to the next slide, please? So what are the goals and benefits of CEQA process in general? CEQA first offers a great opportunity to enhance transparency and public engagement in the form of public meetings, notices, and disclosure of potential environmental impacts in various types of documents. For projects with potential significant impact, CEQA requires also mitigation measures to be provided to minimize those environmental damages or impacts. CEQA also promotes interagency collaboration, which is very critical to effectively serve our community. We don't want to have one agency say, oh, it's not me, it's somebody else. This coordination will help to address. Next slide, please. As far as the public agency may have different roles under CEQA, the district can have any one of the three primary roles under CEQA, depending on the project's nature and relation to the agency. First one is the lead agency role. The lead agency is the public agency that has the principal responsibility for ensuring compliance with CEQA requirements. The district acts as a lead agency for its own projects, such as adopting rules, regulations, or plans. The district also acts as the lead agency for projects that require permits from us, where the district has the greater approval authority over the proposed project compared to all the other public agencies. The second role that could be is responsible agency. In that case, the district acts as a responsible agency when a project requires district permits, but another agency has the greater approval authority compared to the district. Therefore, that agency is the lead agency And an example would be construction of a new industrial facility where they have to go to the local city or county for conditional use. The district must consider the adequacy of air quality impacts of an environmental document prepared by any other lead agency prior to approving our permits. And typically, the district is a responsible agency for most of the projects subject to CEQA of the permitting. The third role is the commenting agency. The district may also comment on air quality impacts of projects where another public agency is the lead agency, and there is no permit required from the district for that project. Under Rule 40, the district already has provisions that enable the district to recover its costs as a responsible or lead agency. Next slide, please. So in which cases is CEQA applicable, or what triggers CEQA? As previously mentioned, CEQA mandates that public agencies evaluate the environmental effects of proposed projects before making a final decision. The project under CEQA is an action on a project subject to a public agency's discretionary approval that may have a significant effect on the environment. The discretionary project requires the exercise of judgment or deliberation, as opposed to situations where the district only has to determine whether there has been conformity with applicable rules and regulations. Next slide, please. So what is the role of the district? In terms of the roles and responsibilities, the district governing board is responsible for adopting rules, regulation plans, and CEQA guidelines. Whereas the Air Pollution Control Office is responsible for approving projects, which include the CEQA documents and approval of the permits for such projects. So the next slide. So what's the discretionary project? Unless the project is ministerial or falls under one of the exemptions, it is discretionary, and discretionary projects are being defined as those that would be subject to best available control technology, or BAC, that's defined in our Rule 20.1, or subject to lowest achievable emission rate, or LAER, also defined in our Rule 20.1. The main difference between BAC and LAER is that LAER applies to major stationary sources and does not take into consideration costs, whereas BAC applies to non-major stationary sources. And does allow to consider costs in determining what's the best control. The other one is toxic best available control technology, or TBAC, that is also defined in our Rule 1200. And then last is the risk reduction requirements of our Rule 1210E, which are permit actions to incorporate enforceable permit conditions for any physical or operational changes or control measures at a stationary source that reduces or eliminates toxic or contaminants emission and associated health risks. So in general, projects that require a permit from the district and are subject to BAC, LAER, feedback, or risk reduction of Rule 1210 requires some level of exercise of judgment or deliberation in approving the project control technology and to establish permit conditions, ongoing compliance with those requirements to reduce pollution or health risks. All other projects that require district permits that are not subject to these are considered ministerial, or they may fall under some of the exemptions under CEQA. Next slide, please. CEQA process offers great opportunity to integrate environmental justice considerations into the CEQA review and to expand our EJ efforts. As far as public engagement, it does offer meaningful public engagement by providing information disclosure that applies to district's public participation plan and language access policies that is adopted by the board. As far as mitigation measures, it prevents cumulative significant increases of air pollution and health risks and ensures alignment with existing plans such as community emission reduction plans. And it's also important to note that purely economic or social impacts under CEQA do not constitute significant However, economic or social effects of a project that would lead to a physical change to the environment may result in significant impact under CEQA. Next slide, please. Now, in order to keep all stakeholders informed, we have a webpage with general information, projects under review, and proposed guidelines. The QR code on the slide can be used to access that page. Last month on September 26th, we sent the proposed guidelines to hundreds of stakeholders via our drop delivery subscription services and requested comments or feedback by October 25th. So far, we have not received any comments. And the last slide, please. So today's request is to consider the proposed CEQA guidelines and recommend approval to the district governing board. And this concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that would like to address the committee on this item?
Perfect, Garcia, we have received one request to speak here in the room, Mr. Cesar Javier. You have 3 minutes to address the board.
I'm very
Begin
happy.
by
for the
state-
first time. Here. Hearing the opinions, the wise sounds of wisdom. Congratulations, sir. Here. I am not trying to flatter you, but that is my opinion. Where is Mr. Bush? The happy guy, coughing guy. I think he's a victim of emission. Oh my God. I could only speak because I am a victim of toxicity, sir. I am not criticizing you. I am trying to massage you and to dig some more on this proposal, on this CEQA mandate from EPA, Air Commission, State, Federal. You know my experience with EPA, Federal? They are there on the 8th floor of a nice building. We cannot talk to them. We can only call them. The security says, sir, that's the EPA office, but you cannot go up. Why? Is there equity here? Is there transparency here? That's EPA, where we are trying to follow their mandate. Why? We are already doing part of EPA's mission, air quality for all. What else do they want? They send me a letter, hey, Mr. Contractor, you better attend the seminar for $420 because if you violate EPA, you will pay $420,000 to only get that ID that I attended a lecture on how to put a plastic to, to cover your dusty working area. $420, 1 day and a half, just to put that curtain, like in the hospitals. That's EPA. You're doing great with air quality as a mission of this, our agency. Tell them, we're doing everything. Don't give another load which we are not capable of doing it. What is happening now in the Tijuana River issue? Tell me, sir. Please tell them, hey, EPA, you shut up. We do our mission here better than you. Why request the federal government to fund them to solve the issue in our front line? That's the logic there. That's why, sir, forgive me timely that I spoke. This ban air pollution control district. I said that. And they were all mesmerized. Why? I am a victim of toxicity, and up to now, it has never been addressed too. It's been 3 years, sir. And again, because you are the only first member, let's say, Ma'am Porvis, what is the issue of Javier? He had attended already 2 meetings.
Javier, please conclude your comment. Your time is ended.
That's another issue. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no requests to speak virtually. That concludes public comment on this item.
Does anybody on the committee have any questions or comments?
I do. you mentioned that there's a window for comments and it's coming up in a few weeks, in a couple weeks, right? October 25th or something. So what kind of comments, if you do get comments, do you respond to them? Do you have to respond to them? Is like, you know, because I know when there's like a CEQA process, there's like a period of comment and then each comment has to be addressed, right? And then that report has to be out. Is it similar with this?
Right, those, you're referring to, Madam Board Member, are the actual CEQA documents.
Right.
Like environmental impact report.
Yes, environmental.
That there is a period for comments, and for those documents, there's a requirement to also respond to all those comments before approving that EIR document. In our case, we are just referring to these guidelines. And of course, you know, if we get any comments before we take this to the November 14th board meeting, we will consider those.
Okay.
And respond to those.
Yes, we definitely respond to those comments, and I think the idea there is to make sure the guidelines is clear enough for
Okay.
this. The information that is in the guidelines is also in the statute, so we wouldn't necessarily have ability to change, but we want to make sure it's clear enough. That's the whole point, just to provide transparency.
Okay. Got it. So it's more like any comments on our draft and, but you know, it's not necessary. Yeah, so it is more, it's a little bit different, but than what I'm talking about, only because you mentioned CEQA there and I know that there's that other,
Yeah,
you know, commenting mechanism. So I was just kind of curious as to like, if people know what they're commenting on, right? Because it's not necessarily like a survey, right? So
right.
like if the public knows, hey, I'm like, what kind of comment is like, great job. Not like, you know,
Yeah,
doesn't really know what kind of comments would they want, so. You know,
Yeah.
because it's not a survey.
yeah, we sent out that notice via our listserv, and, you know, in that notice, we kind of explain, you know, what we're looking for. And
Great.
again, we just want to make sure that what we are publishing, what we are proposing is clear enough for all the stakeholders that could be impacted by this.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, several questions. Again.
I love it.
First, I just want to deal with the staffing of APCD, you know, this more active in reviewing projects and CEQA projects in the county. I know as the agency in the past, we haven't been able to, for various reasons, or didn't do it for various reasons. How are we doing in terms of going forward with being able to comment not only on major EIRs, but hundreds and hundreds of anecdotal documents, even if we just restrict it to the communities that are concerned, whether it's portside communities, border communities, where we have high levels of air pollution. How are we doing in terms of staff?
It's a tall order, as you alluded to. There's hundreds of documents that come out. I mean, I think we're certainly more active than we were in the past. On the website that most of you shared up there, we've got a list of comment letters that we've submitted. That's something that we've added there so that folks can see what our comments are on these various types of projects, where we're the commenting agency as opposed to a lead or responsible agency. It's certainly an area that we need to focus on and try to grow more. As you alluded to, it takes more resources to stay on top of these things. As part of this process, we're also looking at developing and refining, you know, kind of our prioritization for how we look at the projects that we comment on, given the limited staffing availability that we do have. And so as we're able to, you know, refine that and bring in more resources, the idea is that we would, you know, continue to enhance what we're commenting on. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge to get to everything that's out there. Certainly being more active than we were in the past.
Does any of the funding that we receive, is any of that eligible for staffing of environmental review? So let's say we get 617 funding. Does that allow anything for?
Not really. Yeah, there's no real great direct funding source for it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's, as I think was in the presentation, if it's related to CEQA for a permit, then yes, we can bill for that time.
Part of the permit process.
Correct,
Yeah.
and we've got that in our Rule 40, but if we're commenting like on a freeway expansion or something like that, that would just be part of overhead.
And most
Frankly,
of our
and-
work is really with stationary sources as well, right? Since, or do we comment on potential mobile sources?
We do,
Yes.
like the Sandag, transportation plan, things of that nature.
There's lots of comment there.
There's a lot. One project, it's a huge document, it takes a ton of the document, it's really cool.
Which leads to another issue, which is, as you know, Sandag is working with different kinds of criteria. And one of them is SB 375 and the guidelines there. But there are other guidelines being developed by CARB. So the scoping plan for BMT reduction of I see this continuously 25% per capita by 2030. That is our current target, near target, which is pretty high, 25% BMT reduction. That's 3-4% per year starting last year. So that's something that they're working with in their plan. So I understand OPR, Office Plan Research, put out guidelines on CEQA review, and one of them is that we have goals and set like 375, but all NPOs also have to look at any other plans that are existence and have to develop alternatives for that. So just keep that in mind because of that, and we have a scoping plan from CARB, our sister state agency, that Sandag really needs to develop an alternative to that goal. They may not. Who knows how they address that? It's going to be interesting. That's a long, big CEQA question for attorneys, but nevertheless, it's a huge goalpost to try to reach, and I think NPOs may be working with that in different ways. And to me, it's important because the scoping plan from CARB is based on state law. It is scientific number. It's a hard number, and we should pay attention to science and the hard numbers that are provided, as well as the state laws that have been passed by the legislation. So to me, all the regional agencies, NPOs have to heed that in some way, and per CEQA they have to. In any case, that's a different question. I wasn't planning on asking questions on that. But I am interested in cumulative impacts, and also you mentioned that in your presentation. I'm particularly interested in how we can have cumulative impacts in our most impacted communities, particularly when it comes to the Portside community and other sensitive communities identified in the existing plans that we've helped develop. So let's say we have a project in one of those communities, and we know those communities are already heavily impacted. They're in the environmental screen, red, orange zone. How do we treat that with regards to the question of cumulative impacts with the project? Any thoughts?
So under CEQA, there is a requirement to look at cumulative impacts of past, present, and potential future projects that are related to the same project that you are evaluating. There are, different ways that you can look at it. If the project, for example, does not have a significant impact in one environmental area, but there are other projects that are nearby that are being constructed at the same time or have been constructed to relate to this project. And if you look at the combined cumulative impacts of all of those projects, it may become significant, and CEQA requires to consider. You don't have to do as detailed of an analysis on cumulative impact of every project that you have to do on the specific project that you are proposing and doing the analysis for, but it does require to take a look at some of those cumulative impacts.
So if you were to identify a cumulative impact, let's just say a facility that is right next to an existing facility, and then, we can document that the potential health risk is going to overlap, right? So, and that overlap would rise to a level that we would consider significant, then we would require mitigation measures, feasible mitigation measures. And then, those requirements would be part of the permit, for example, because they have to be enforceable, right? So that would be kind of the process. And another thing is that we needed to ensure compliance with the existing plan. And so for projects in the Portside community, for example, we would have to make sure that that project is going to align with existing commitment that we have under the reserve for that community. These are really important, avenues to ensure that we are meeting our commitment, for those communities.
So in recent years, there's been a few projects in Logan Heights. And I don't need to go into details of each one. There was one that came up recently. I think it was for fuel transfer station of some sort. A lot of trucks, but also the site itself, I think, would have been one of the ones that would have required a permit from APCD.
Yes.
So, so maybe we could have used Rule 40 to help fund the comment on that.
We're involved with that project.
Right. So then I'm interested in the issue of when we do make a comment, is it towards mitigation or how much can we pull the no project alternative trigger on projects like that?
Well, I think CEQA requires us to propose feasible mitigation measures. And so we would explore all the feasible measures for that project. I mean, the first consideration would not be, don't consider this project. We would explore mitigation measures. And as technology advances, there are different things that facilities can do to, mitigate any significant impact.
In under CEQA, there is a requirement to look at alternatives, and one of the alternatives is always going to be the no project alternative.
Right.
The no project alternative also needs its own analysis. For example, let's say the sewage treatment plant wants to expand, and under the environmental impact report, they have to analyze the no project alternative. Well, in that case, the no project alternative means that the sewer increase in the sewage is not going to be treated at this facility, so it may have its own impact that may be even worse than the project impact. So it does require looking at no project alternative, but that doesn't mean that every project should not be built because there is no impact. There's no project.
Sure. There's alternative site for that project that is not in the impacted community or maybe in an area that's yellow or green in a Alabama speeding map, so that that would make more sense. And I think that's why I know project alternative is sometimes the best even under those circumstances because of the issue of cumulative impacts. So I got all those things in one sentence. But I think I appreciate all the work that's going into looking at this some more. I know CEQA review is a huge workload. Just to look at the numbers of neg decks that are going through, I think it's worthwhile to look at many of them, particularly in these communities that we're trying to protect, that we do have plans to try to improve there. And it's important for us to look at that because as we know, I don't know, 98% of CEQA documents go through without no objection or any not even a flag will raise. Only less than 1% are litigated. Most of those don't go through. So it really is important for us to do what we can and do it in a place that is most effective in the communities that really need that kind of review. So I really do appreciate us as an agency which cares about air quality, looking at the criteria and moving thoughtfully in terms of how we proceed and using the resources that we may have as limited as they are. I've been in other agencies in which there's very limited resources, huge impacts, and we have to pick and choose which will make comments. The other point I make is if we can, it's good to make these comments during scoping session very early on, letting the lead agency know we're watching and this is important. The cumulative impacts is important, and that of course I'll give more time to work on the project and see if they can alleviate that. But in any case, I think that's important. Then also let the community know that these are issues, so that other people that may be involved in the scope plan will actually pick it up and maybe they'll
But I agree, I mean, support this, this is an action item, so I would stop. Yeah.
Would you like to make a motion?
I do make with a, motion to agree with, staff recommendations on this. Plan.
I have no comments. Did you?
And I'll second.
One second. Great, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I would look at, there's only three of us. No abstentions.
Thank you. Member Bush, Medina absent. Passes with those who are present voting aye.
Great, thank you, Madam Clerk. Let's go to agenda item D3. Just to note, this is an informational item only, so there will be no motion or vote taken by the committee on this. This is update on warehouse working group addressing Madam Clerk, do you mind providing public testimony instructions?
Thank you, Vice Chair Burkett Garcia. I would ask any members of the public that wish to address the board on this item that are joining us virtually, to please use the instructions that are provided on the bottom of your screen, or press *9 now to indicate that you wish to speak on this item. If there are any members of the public that are joining us here in the conference room that wish to address the board on this item, I ask that you please submit your request to speak form at this time. We will not accept any additional requests to speak once the presentation has begun. All of the testimony will be at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Great, thank you. And now it looks like our staff presentation is going to be given by Chief of Emission Reductions and Strategies, Kathy Kean, is that correct?
We're pulling an audit with these.
Okay.
Our true subject matter expert, we'll develop the supervisor, Nick Cormier, and run through it.
Great, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee. Then I'm Nick Cormier, Rural Development Supervisor. At the request of Chair Medina, we're coming before you today with an update on the district's indirect source activities for warehouses. So I'm here to give you some information about the work group has been doing over the last few months and our next steps. Next slide, please. As a reminder, an indirect source is a facility that attracts or may attract mobile sources of pollution. AB 423 directed the district to consider adopting an indirect source rule to address air pollution from mobile sources that are associated with stationary sources, such as ports, warehouses, and distribution centers. The picture on the right side of the slide illustrates points in which emissions are generated from mobile equipment operating at stationary sources, which could then be considered indirect sources. Next slide, please. As part of its direction to staff on indirect sources in June 2023, the board directed staff to convene a working group of community and industry stakeholders to continue proactive engagement and evaluation. This group, otherwise known as the Warehouse Working Group, or WWG, was convened to provide input and feedback on possible regulatory and non-regulatory strategies that could reduce indirect source emissions from warehouses and distribution centers in San Diego County. Specifically, the governing board requested staff to consider and potentially develop alternative regulatory and non-regulatory strategies that could further reduce indirect source emissions at the community level. In particular, to evaluate such approaches from smaller warehouses between 50,000 and 100,000 square feet in size, and to prioritize impacted communities within the process. Next slide, please. The WWG was composed of key local community, environmental, industrial, and government stakeholders interested in the freight and warehousing sectors, community health, and air quality. We also received important feedback and representation from local trucking companies that service warehouses, representatives from warehouse operators and landlords, regional chambers of commerce, and education and health officials. The group by design was set up to hear from varying perspectives of community and affected stakeholders. And we're happy to report that we accomplished that goal to help staff be better informed and aware of the issue. Understandably, WWG participants did not always agree with one another on the pathway forward, but the information that was brought to the table was incredibly useful, and for that we want to sincerely thank all the attendees for their time and attention over the past year. Next slide, please. The WWG started meeting last September. Since then, the WWG has met a total of 10 times, convening for almost 20 hours of in-depth technical conversations about a variety of topics, which I'll discuss on the following slide. The meetings were typically held virtually once a month, and meetings typically average around 40 registrants, indicating a strong participation rate. WWG meetings were open to the public, so interested parties were welcome to attend and provide their feedback either during the meetings or to staff at any point. All meetings were also recorded and posted to the district's YouTube channel. And while we'd encourage everyone to review the in-depth conversations that were had as part of those meetings to capture the full context, staff also developed short meeting summaries following each meeting for easier consumption, which are also available on the WWG webpage shown on the screen, along with presentation and meeting materials. Next slide, please. Summarizing 10 meetings at 20 hours of conversations onto one slide is a challenge, but we're going to attempt to do that. At the beginning of the WWG, much time was spent making sure attendees had a baseline knowledge of the topic, including why we were discussing it, the direction the board provided us, expectations for the group, and determining the logistics and meeting cadence. Baseline knowledge discussed included an overview of the inventory of warehouses that were identified by CoStar, better understanding the legal authority that the district has for indirect sources, and pitching ideas for possible non-regulatory strategies that could still achieve emission reductions. We then provided necessary background about how APCD writes a rule, a complicated process that many were not familiar with. We also dove into the best way to define what a warehouse is, and continued conversation about different non-regulatory strategies, such as unique incentive programs or ways to amend existing programs to achieve reductions from the warehouse sector. We also benefited from presentations from CARB staff outlining how their mobile source regulations will reduce emissions in the coming years region-wide. In early 2024, we further investigated an appointment system project in the pipeline for Calexico's port of entry that could potentially reduce emissions by reducing idling and border wait times. As a possible proxy for something similar in San Diego County. We also provided frequent updates about how South Coast Warehouse ISR rule was going, both legally as well as implementation. This included how they count truck visits, how facilities were complying, and what burden the district was taking to oversee such a program. We also made sure to listen to what stakeholders had to say by convening a listening session and how and what incentive programs could best help stakeholders, and convening 2 site visits to warehouses in the border area to better understand their operations. We also saw different ideas and viewpoints brought to the table, including an alternative warehouse analysis completed by IEA of what a non-regulatory or regulatory strategy could achieve. In the last few meetings of the WWG, we focused more on the APCD's analysis of what a possible regulatory approach might achieve. To do that, we've been discussing more technical aspects, including determining local truck trip rate for warehouses throughout the county and by size and region, as well as baseline emissions and possible emission reductions that could be achieved from a rulemaking. We also dove deeper into a recent survey of commercial vehicle activity in San Diego County by SANDAG that provided the WWG with information about the warehousing and transportation sector specific to San Diego County. At our last meeting held on Monday, we went through a high-level analysis of the truck trip rate and emission estimate APCD has calculated, and also noted recent approvals by EPA of South Coast Respective Rule, as well as the emergence of Assembly Bill 98, which will require new or expanded warehouses of all sizes statewide to meet minimum requirements moving forward. Next slide, please. Again, the WWG was convened to collect varying perspectives from a wide variety of stakeholders, and the group was not typically able to reach consensus on most topics. That being said, the district was not expecting such agreement. But the feedback we received was invaluable to making sure staff had the necessary information to make informed decisions as we prepare for the next phase of this effort. Summarize the information we've collected and to propose additional options for consideration to the governing board. One area where we did see some general agreement was for the ability of non-regulatory or incentive options to be available in some capacity, whether alongside a regulatory strategy or in lieu of a local regulation. APCD presented a possible 3-tier strategy for such incentive opportunities to the WWG, and feedback was generally well received. From industry's perspective, there were some specific topics mentioned frequently that should be further explored. These included better evaluating the impacts of CARB mobile source regulations, concerns whether identified warehouses were actually doing goods movement activity, dev truck and infrastructure availability issues, difficulty in tracking trucks, and noting the unique circumstances of warehousing activity along the border. From the environmental perspective, we frequently heard that we should ensure circles are kept top of mind to improve the health and wellness of residents in disadvantaged communities. And keep in mind the possible cumulative impact of many smaller warehouses clustered around sensitive receptors. They also noted that a rule could provide more certainty in achieving emission reductions and could result in more localized emission reductions, which set up in a way that could target such facilities in these neighborhoods. From an implementation perspective, we also kept coming back to two key themes that staff will continue to be investigating, including the difficult dynamic of localized emission reductions versus region-wide reductions, which an ISR may require, and learning what we can, both good and bad, from AQMD's implementation of Rule 2305 to avoid stumbles later if a rulemaking is pursued. Next slide, please. The WWG's participation and experience resulted in two additional concepts being brought to the floor for further discussion that went beyond just standard incentive program and rulemaking approaches, initially discussed with the governing board last month. The first of which was an alternative strategy to better understand the possible emission reductions that could be achieved through an incentive-only focused approach that would voluntarily replace light-duty trucks and vehicles with electric alternatives. The idea would lean on the more ubiquitous availability of light-duty equipment and charging, compared to heavy-duty trucks and infrastructure that are still in their infancy. Put simply, if APCD and/or their partner organizations solely focused our incentive dollars, such as those in AB 617, to voluntarily replace as many light-duty vehicles as possible instead of doing an ISR, would there be comparable emission reductions achieved in relation to a rule? While the concept could potentially result in comparable emission reductions, it would also require dedicating most APCD funds for a number of years to realize such an effort, which could delay other efforts to achieve certain goals. The second concept brought to the table was to further investigate regulating warehouses of all sizes within state designated disadvantaged communities in a possible ISR rule. If the warehouse was located within 1,000 feet of a sensitive receptor, such as a school, park, health clinic, or nursing home. The idea would be to target warehouses that could be impacting neighborhoods in close proximity and to ensure they have regulatory requirements to adhere to regardless of warehouse size. While this concept could potentially provide additional emission reductions in disadvantaged communities, it's not clear whether APCD has the legal authority to establish such requirements for criteria pollutant reduction in the way that air toxic hotspots are done today. And if we do, whether it could expose APCD to additional legal scrutiny if a rule is eventually developed. Additionally, there could be challenges with ensuring that a sufficient number of compliance options are available to smaller warehouses, given their smaller footprint and potential space constraints. Staff appreciates the alternative ideas that have been brought to the table and will continue evaluating the merits in relation to APCD's analysis that we are concurrently doing. Next slide, please. At our last WWG meeting this week, staff went through a technical analysis that explained how we developed truck trip rates specific for San Diego County, an accomplishment we thought wasn't potentially feasible after our June 2023 governing board meeting. While there are caveats in place with our analysis, the truck trip rates calculated established a small but integral component for calculating baseline emissions from warehouses in San Diego County, as well as what a possible rule could net for the region if pursued. A summary of the data we presented at a high level is on the screen and looks at two possible regulatory scenarios. In the first scenario, staff evaluated emissions and possible reductions if a rule were to be adopted for warehouses above 100,000 square feet in size. In this scenario, staff believes around 240 warehouses would potentially be subject to a rule, and that those facilities currently emit up to 47 tons per year of NOx and 0.7 tons per year of PM 2.5. If an ISR rule were to be developed, staff determined an ISR rule could achieve up to 22 tons per year of NOx reductions and 0.3 tons per year of PM 2.5 reductions. In the second scenario, APCD looked at what could be done if the warehouse size threshold was lowered to 50,000 square feet. As anticipated, the baseline emissions, warehouse count, and the anticipated emission reductions all get larger, but max out at up to 44 tons per year of NOx reductions if an ISR rule was in place. There are several important caveats and considerations with these estimates. First, APCD believes these numbers are likely to be the best case scenario and assume all facilities would select a menu option to replace existing diesel trucks with zero-emission vehicles. Since the district cannot legally require a facility to upgrade to a zero-emission truck in an ISR rule, and that many facilities may opt to select alternative options, we thus can conclude that the availability of such options would likely reduce the potential emission reductions that could be achieved through an ISR. Second, these calculations were done very conservatively. While they factor in emission reductions that are going to be achieved from most CARB mobile source regulations, they notably do not include the reductions that will be achieved through the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. ACF will likely further reduce the surplus emission reductions on the table for possible ISR rule. At this time, staff cannot fully account for the emission benefits from ACF in relation to these calculations, in part because CARB's Meta Online tool does not include that regulation yet. However, staff is in contact with CARB to see if there would be other ways to extract ACF benefit information specifically from warehousing operations. While staff does know the approximate emission benefits for the region overall from ACF, it does not specifically reference the reductions specifically from the warehousing and transportation sector. The third caveat is that APCD is utilizing older SANDAG data from 2016, which is the most current that is publicly available at present time. This is intended to demonstrate proof of concept, and such data would be updated at a later date when it's made available. Depending on what the data looks like, these new numbers could increase or decrease our estimates accordingly, but staff does not believe the estimates would change significantly in either direction. Fourth, we note that while PM 2.5 reductions are minimal, diesel particulate matter reductions would be achieved as a co-benefit. This would come from facilities opting to select project options that could replace diesel truck options in favor of low NOx or ZEV technology. And finally, the last caveat to mention is to recognize how these numbers and estimates have changed over time as staff has refined our methodology. For example, the 2022 RACs provided a high-level population-weighted estimate of what a possible warehouse ISR might achieve, which was estimated at that time to be about 142 tons of NOx reduced per year in San Diego County for warehouses at the 100,000 square foot threshold. At this early stage, this estimate did not factor in the exact number of warehouses in San Diego County, nor did it take into account local truck trip rates. The 2023 ISR framework estimated a warehouse ISR could achieve up to 48 tons per year of NOx reductions for warehouses above the 100,000 square foot threshold. This estimate was gradually more refined, utilizing CoStar to develop a local warehouse inventory, but still utilized truck trip rates developed for South Coast. The more refined estimate you're seeing today, which now tops out at up to 22 tons per year of NOx reduced for warehouses above about 100,000 square feet and 44 tons per year of NOx using a lower 50,000 square foot threshold, utilizes the most refined data to date with both a local warehouse inventory and locally generated truck trip rate data. All of this data is of course preliminary and subject to change, but provides a snapshot of what the district is seeing right now. Next slide, please. Switching gears, another development we spoke about at our last WWG meeting was the legislation that developed very recently affecting warehouses. Introduced by the state legislature in late August and signed by Governor Newsom on September 29th, AB 98 is a new law that will apply to new and expanded warehouses that are proposed for any floor size, though more requirements appear to be required for facilities being proposed over 250,000 square feet in size. District staff are still trying to understand and digest the bill, but some of the requirements of the bill will include building standards for new and expanded warehouses, minimizing impacts on certain sensitive receptors, including residences, schools, daycare, public parks, nursing homes, and hospitals, minimum distance requirements between homes and warehouses with buffer zones, and for some warehouse size categories and sizes, all forklifts and specific equipment serving the warehouse should be zero emission to comply with CARB requirements. This bill is something that caught a lot of groups and people off guard, and staff will need to further evaluate what impacts it will have in relation to any regulatory or non-regulatory strategies that the district could pursue. It appears that the bill is primarily affecting new and expanded warehouse operations, meaning existing warehouse operations may not be as impacted, which could still allow opportunities to benefit from a local rulemaking and or incentive programs. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps from here on out? Staff will be considering comments today and from all WWG meetings and work on finalizing the truck trip rates, baseline emission, and emission reduction estimate calculation. Once that is done, an ISR framework supplement report will be prepared to summarize the WWG discussions and the district's analysis to date. The supplement will be a follow-up to the framework document we prepared in June 2023 for the boards and public consideration, and will include more technical analyses and information than what we presented in recent WWG presentation. In line with WWG feedback, the district hopes to make this report available for public review and comment for at least 30 days prior to any consideration or decision-making opportunities to the governing board, to ensure feedback is collected and incorporated into any board item. We do not have an exact timeline for when this will be made available, but we're hoping we would make this available before the end of the calendar year. Following the review period of the ISR framework supplement, staff then expects to seek direction on this topic from the governing board in early 2025, with the possibility of another update to the PPC prior to that if needed. If the governing board directs staff to pursue an ISR, then staff would move to kick off required environmental review processes under CEQA, further refine cost effectiveness estimates, and evaluate public health benefits through a socioeconomic impact assessment, or SI. Next slide, please. This concludes my long presentation. We're happy to answer questions.
Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that want to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Vice Chair Burt Garcia. We have 4 requests to speak on this item, 2 in person and 2 virtually. I'll take those that are in person first. Our first speaker is Cesar Javier. You will have the timer on the screen to self-regulate your time. Please begin by saying your name for the record.
2 minutes, 3.
3 minutes.
3?
Yes.
Thank you. This is a laudable effort, sir, ma'am, and I think our chair here, governing board, my friend too. I dream of him always when we always sense the fuel on the ceramics kiln. I spoke on this because it's also a warehouse. That artist then is a warehouse where they keep their chemical products used in the ceramics manufacturing. And science says that if you ingest those leftovers, leftovers in casting this ceramics like this I showed you, when you ingest that, it's just a matter of time. Lung cancer. And we felt the introductory odor and the dust we ingested. I tell you, science is guiding us. That's why we are scared. That's why we are here. That's why we attend to all meetings for that social equity. Why was it approved and placed there? Constructed, located, operated. And they have the free will when to operate, when to put it on. How about us, unguarded, sleeping? When topography, the terrain aspect, says so that the intersection of wind forces in a plane provides a temporary mantle where the emission should be go vertically up there. But poison gases are heavier than ordinary air. Therefore, the downwind now is very clear to us. And the police that is supposed to investigate say, Mr. Javier, Purita, you close your window, build a wall. That is what we call indirect emission if we put one. Please continue and research on how to, mitigate, stop, reduce without considering the word helping businesses. Please, it's a matter of weighing now. Is this business really worth considering our mitigation measure to provide air quality all level. I will not use air quality this time, clean air. Or shall we say oxygen? You know, when you hear the siren with this paramedic, what is the first measure of? Oxygen. We need oxygen, especially those victims in the Tijuana. I was precise, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kyle Muscala. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record and self-regulate your time.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, committee members and CD staff. My name is Kyle Hasela. I'm with Environmental Health Coalition. I'm a pinch hitter today for Nicholas Powell, who would be here. However, he's out of office. He's back tomorrow. So I just wanted to offer praise to ABCD staff for all of the hard work and long hours that have gone into the warehouse working group, developing this analysis, and looking forward to seeing what the next steps are and the report that you're developing. This is a great opportunity for APCD and the region to address pollution that is not otherwise set to be addressed by other regulations, state or federal or otherwise. Especially when we think about the disproportionate impacts to environmental justice communities, where we think about larger warehouse facilities in the portside neighborhoods of San Diego. You have residents living next to multiple warehouses that are smaller facilities. So there's community impacts there. And so really encouraged to hear that that is being considered and looked at. One of the big things that was mentioned is that there's some concerns about the idea of addressing pollution from sensitive receptors due to some legal questions, and we're just willing to continue to help and support and encourage and work with staff on identifying creative solutions to those challenges. There are some existing precedents for sensitive receptors being addressed by rules from other air districts, so we're encouraged by that. And as far as the question of whether to move forward, the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation prioritizes large fleets, priority fleets, and some of the smaller actors in our region are going to be missed by some of the bigger state rules that are in effect. So there's an opportunity to complement local action with state action, and prioritizing smaller warehouses in the EJ communities. It's one facility that's 100,000 square feet that has 100 truck trips, for example, is like living next to 25 facilities that have 4 truck trips a day. So that's a problem that we hope to get creative in how to address that through regulation and incentives and prioritizing action. So this regulation really exciting to see that the analysis showed that as much as half of PM and NOx emissions from these facilities could be reduced. So we encourage APC to press onward, and we will be continuing to work with you all. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to our virtual callers. Let's see. Emily Cassell. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Hello, I'm Emily Castle. I'm the Government Affairs Events and Projects Manager at Biocom California, and we would like more information on how a potential indirect source rule would impact the life science industry. We have many contractors coming to our facilities for delivery of delicate research materials, and we don't have direct control over those operations. So it's important to keep life science, which is the San Diego region's fastest growing and highest paying industry, in mind when crafting these policies that could have larger impacts on our industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is Craig Benedetto. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Good. Good afternoon. My name is Craig Benedetto, and I'm here today representing NAIOP San Diego, the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. I'd like to start by thanking staff and specifically commending Mr. Watt for keeping the faith with his water bottle. Go Padres. Anyway, our members help provide the space for businesses that operate and are likely to be most impacted by a potential indirect source rule. As noted by your staff, we have strong concerns about an ISR and its impact on jobs in our region. It should be noted that San Diego is vastly different from the area covered by the South Coast AQMD, which is being used as the model for what can be done in our region. Our development and transportation patterns are completely different. Given San Diego's location on the border, for example, we have a significant amount of pass-through traffic that is hard to sort out from available data sources. On the development side, the facilities to our north are far larger by orders of magnitude, and their impacts far different than the majority of facilities in San Diego. In short, these differences make attempting to determine the impacts and therefore the benefits of an ISR very difficult, if not impossible, to determine. The simple truth is that an ISR for San Diego will disproportionately impact small and medium-sized businesses. The estimates being developed are based on information that is too anecdotal and unrelational to actual operations, and operations vary. Assuming that all businesses operating out of facilities defined as a warehouse operate in the same way is simply not accurate. Additionally, the state and federal government are making their own efforts to deal with truck emissions and traffic, including the state bill staff mentioned. And they're coming back again next year in the state legislative cycle to go over that bill again. The author has already indicated that. Redundant efforts at the local level simply do not need to be pursued. It cannot be understated that the cost implications of an ISR could drive impacted businesses to close or out of the region. The trips won't go away when that happens. They will just be longer and create more emissions, not less, thus eliminating any potential benefit in emissions reductions. Given all of this, we would strongly encourage a more collaborative approach with our coalition, one that is based on incentives rather than rulemaking. We are ready to work with your team on just such an approach to help accelerate the changes already being forwarded by other government agencies. Thank you for your consideration and for your service.
That concludes public testimony on this item.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any comments? As we look looking.
I'm quick on AB 98. So this just was signed by the governor?
Correct. Yeah, September 29th.
Can you tell me more what?
I think what we know is pretty much what was on the slide. I mean, it's effectively, it's a piece of legislation that was came about very late in the legislative process, from what I understand.
We've gotten amendment. The
Yeah,
one, oh,
there
when
we
we've gotten amendment, the last one.
Yeah, very last minute bill. And what we know about it is that there are some requirements that apply to all new and expanded warehouses throughout the state. And eventually, I think it phases in January of 2026. But there are some minimum requirements that will be in place for new and expanded warehouses. If you're above a certain threshold of 250,000 square feet, if you're proposing a really big warehouse, then you're going to have to meet some requirements. And I think they define the term as a tier 21st century tier 1 warehouse, which is going to require them to do a lot of different things in their warehouse, such as installing infrastructure, making sure they're using the cleanest equipment. So they're really targeting the largest warehouses for that kind of 21st century designed warehouse to make sure whatever's new coming in is going to be really kind of the cleanest that it could be. The smaller warehouses, they have some kind of minimum requirements that they have to meet. But again, it just refers to new and expanded. It doesn't really, from our understanding, it doesn't appear to impact existing warehouses and existing operations. We still do need to kind of dive further into the bill to digest it, but that's our understanding.
That's interesting that's now, I imagine they may have some tests and some other challenges before it's fully implemented by 2030. But there is a roadmap, so to speak, that legislation with regard to how to progress on these warehouses, even though there may be new ones. And but then I started thinking of how if that's roadmap that's been set by state, that we piggyback on that kind of a roadmap, as we consider our indirect source rule with regard to, how it would progress. You know, that maybe a similar kind of phasing, as well as, but rather than say it's just new ones, we say maybe we'll go backwards in time, since if you're very old, you know, you're gonna have to meet this at a certain level, and then if you're newer, or you may have to meet it sooner, some kind of a strategy to use this framework that this legislation has given us. Because it may help in a number of ways. One is already state law, and I imagine it's going to be eventually tested to some degree, along with what's already being tested in of course their district with that law. So to me, it opens up some real possibilities in terms of how to go forward. The other comment I have, or just for more, just in case you don't have enough input. And I mentioned this before. So SANDAG has been asked to deal with reducing health impacts in the next plan, and I've been asking them to look at transportation advantage strategies to replace warehouses, and to include in the next regional plan some pilot programs, particularly in those type of communities. Which I'm not sure how that would work with the warehouse law that we're considering, other than the ability to look at what those transportation management strategies is going to be, how that might coincide with indirect source rules that we may come up with. So it may be a combination of those two that work together in these pilot programs. If it's too complex, obviously, forget it, we'll just have to do something separate. But not knowing what's going to come out of the next transportation plan, and how they're going to address that, and what kind of transportation management strategy they employ. I think we don't know, and I think we may give us some options that will enter the mix that we have to consider. And I can only read what those might be, but I see a chance for overlapping rules and strategies from the transportation plan as well as our indirect source rule, and that they might be pretty effective. So we'll see how that goes. I know they've been looking at it pretty hard, and I'm not sure what's going to come out of it. It may be a while before anything comes out, and if it does, my guess is there will be some pilot programs being entered into the next transportation plan, which may or may not work. And I know there's been a lot of public input in your meetings, 20-some hours of meetings. That's pretty impressive, a lot of good input. So I hope all the concerns from those in the warehouse industry are being heard, and that we hear them. Likewise, community organizations have also been input in their concerns that the warehouse rule does affect those communities that are most impacted in some way that is effective. Because if we come up with a rule and we end up with not affecting the disparity between communities that are heavily impacted with poor air quality and those who are not, in history, it's shown that government has tried to do things and it's had the opposite effect. So I hope we're not going in that regard. And I think that it helps us to heed those community organizations that have looked at the proposed rules, given us some modeling to tell us, well, if you do this particular rule, it's not going to help these communities very much. It's going to help, again, the communities outside of the impacted parts of our region. So
I think we have to certainly understand that the intent of the warehouse pool, indirect pool, is to help those communities that are more affected the most. So I think that modeling and those that work that various people are doing are very important in that consideration. I think that's all. Yeah.
That was great. Do you have any comments?
No, I found, thank you for, I'm glad that, Member Medina asked for an update. I was curious as to how the conversations were going, and thank you for doing such a great job capturing all those meetings in one place. Very helpful. Work, and I'm very impressed. Yeah, we'll see what happens, because I know, I didn't think there'd be a lot of agreement on things, but I think it's important to hear everyone, so, and I'm glad that you have such high number of participants as well. So I'll also visit the page that has like the recap. I'm curious. That's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you guys. It's been a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work when we see that, so we appreciate that. Okay, so the next agenda item is E, general committee comments. Do you have any general committee comments?
So my comment was not specifically on this committee, but I know we talked about something in the last meeting. So just, I've been tasked with my colleagues on the Escondido City Council to just ask, with the recent, yesterday at our agenda, we had a urgency ordinance for a temporary moratorium on battery storage projects. And we're the first in the region to do that. It's a 45-day, just kind of pause. To see what next steps we can do to make these projects safer. But I know that I had reached out to APCD when that fire happened about a month ago in Escondido, kind of what's the role of APCD with battery storage projects. So I don't know if we have something coming up on an agenda, but I think I know that member Sanchez, member Sanchez had also asked about, in times of emergencies, how the different agencies collaborate and communicate with each other, and how that information gets given to the public, because there are complaints of, people tasting metal in their mouth, and yet being told by certain agencies there's no dangerous levels of, pollution, and it's still safe. Yet schools are classes are getting canceled and businesses are closing. So trying to just be thoughtful and proactive, and, should something like that happen again, kind of what's the role of APCD and municipalities in those kind of situations. So yeah, I'm just kind of bringing that as something of interest to the city of Stone. And I don't know if that merits having a standing agenda item, if there's already, maybe an update on what those protocols are, would be, I think, helpful.
I can try and answer that, and then Holly's gonna cut me off if we start to have a brown eye.
Gotcha, sorry.
And this is an update I should have provided in the context of the Tijuana River Valley. This experience combined with the battery storage fire, combined with the odor event that happened in North County in that same time frame during that heat event, really made us look at our incident response capabilities, and I think identify some gaps. And so one of the things we are going to be working on, and we'll be bringing it back to a future agenda, is our incident response plan. And so this board adopted that plan, I want to say 2021, somewhere in there. And so it's time for us to kind of revisit it and scrub it, and also to look at the equipment that we have and our capabilities and determine, is it sufficient? So as I mentioned in the Tijuana River Valley update, South Coast came down, they have a mobile van. I got very jealous with a lot of their resources, but they are also 10 times our size, right? We're looking at what we can do in terms of borrowing resources from other agencies right now. You've heard some of that. But we may also want to have more of those resources available locally, especially as, with climate change, we have more heat events, we have more odor events. We may need more of those capabilities. So all that to say, we'll be bringing that back to a future agenda, looking at the incident response plan again, and then in future budget, discussions, we may be talking about additional kind of response resources that, that may be, you know, advisable.
Thank you. So now I'm glad that I know that, so incident response plan, well, we have one.
We have
We'll
one.
get an update.
Yeah.
And then when that comes up, that'll be a good opportunity for us to engage.
And it's there, it's on our website right now.
Okay.
And so, it's just, you know, we are gonna need to kind of revisit it, to make sure that we can use lessons learned from these past events,
Great.
to make it even better.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
So along those lines, then I have a question, or just to reaffirm. That instance, response really requires us to notify, Office of Emergency Services at the county, and they're the ones that actually put out the notice to the community and work with the community to notify any residents that may be potential danger and have them be evacuated, right? So it's not, APCD doesn't do evacuations.
Right. And yeah, so to answer that, we don't have the authority to do evacuations. We don't have the authority to order anybody to leave an area. We have very limited authority to potentially issue an interim abatement order to a business, for example, that was causing an imminent threat to public health. But we would work with OES in cases of threats to immediate life and health. We'd work with local hazmat, local public health department for issues where, you know, we saw in some of these odor events that hazmat went out and determined there wasn't an immediate threat to life and health. We might still put out an odor advisory, much like we do with smoke advisory during a fire. So we can let people know, hey, we're watching this. But again, we're going to be looking at our incident response plan to determine if there's additional resources that we could bring to the table to provide more information in those types of events.
So if we identified a gas that was toxic to some degree, and I don't know what threshold it would have to pass before it gets to the point in which it's not good for people to breathe, we would notify Office of Emergency Services, right? And then do we say to them, we recommend that this.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
How does that work?
Starting with that.
Yeah, we might be getting specific on a topic.
Yeah, I would encourage, maybe we can look at, agendize it for future meetings. Cause yeah, it is kind of
Working.
I appreciate the fact that, we want answers, but we also need to provide them.
Yeah, well, let me not ask that question. But I just make a comment that I'm glad we're looking into that whole plan again. I want to look into it some more in terms of working with our other agencies in the county, and I hope we're doing that. I hope we'll also do some kind of after action analysis, debrief as to how it goes. So I just want to also compliment our staff. This was over a month ago when we were getting those reports of the Tijuana River thing, which was happening at the heels of our incidents with battery fire. So you were already working overtime, and it was already a weekend. And within that weekend, we issued an advisory to the community on the Tijuana River. Mostly probably based on the 2,000 complaints we released, let alone other data that was coming in front of us. So I think to me, that shows that we are responsive as best we can in providing a reasonable alert to the community. That's on the best information we have. And I think we need to continue on that. I hope that whole process gives us information to be able to respond in that way in the future, but maybe with less headache and ease of doing that.
And maybe that because of that incident, it'll give us more criteria and what would trigger those kinds of things. And I think that was helpful, to go through that. But I know that was a lot of effort. So I was on the phone with, quite a bit, and I imagine you were on the phone a lot more with a lot more people. So I think, that was a good lesson, and maybe, we could do well, I'm sure you probably already did some debriefing on it already, but I think, as an agency, we could see that as a great event that we did well, it's also a learning event as well, and that will make it easier in the future, with less stress along the way, hopefully. So I think that's really good. That's my only, comment that I have. I hope to look into that further in the next month and a half that I have left. Then after that, I won't have to worry about it.
Member of the public.
Yeah, and that's exactly, well, you guys are good. You would give me 3 minutes these days. Oh, so Sandak could be only 1 minute. So watch out, 3 minutes for me, it's a long time.
Thank you, everyone. I don't have any comments other than, again, thank you to staff for all of your hard work. Our next meeting, of the Planning and Policy Committee is scheduled for December 12th, 2024 at 2 p.m. and that's pending any agenda items for consideration. So we will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.